So in this segment, we're going to look at turning this mid poly mesh here into a low poly mesh we can bake the high poly mesh onto, and as well as that, we can texture that low poly mesh and use it in game. So the first step is just removing the bevel modifier off every part of the gun. So I'm just going to remove these modifiers and then hide the pieces as I go. Now the kind of topology budget we're going to be looking at for these particular pieces, probably all in all, we want to try and keep it under 50,000 polygons. And if we can manage that, that should keep us well on target for a game-ready model. I'm just removing weird normal modifiers as well, as we won't really need them. I will leave important modifiers, however, like the mirror. There we go. That's the model now cleaned up from this part, and it seems we have a few artifacts around the scene. I'm just going to delete off all of these previously used box cutters, as we don't need them anymore. And I just need to make sure not to delete any parts of the rifle I want to actually keep. Yeah, it seems everything's alright. A couple more cutters here. Just get rid of those. And two more large cutters there, all gone. Okay, this is now quite ready to work with. So, now we've removed the cutters, the bevels, we want to look at simplifying the geometry of certain parts of this gun down to be appropriate for a low poly. So let's just turn on the statistics and check. We're actually within the budget now, but I would say that this model is still not ready, topologically, to be turned into a low poly. I think a good place to start would be with this handguard here, as I don't believe it needs too many changes. For certain things are not so useful for a low poly model. For example, this loop that runs around the top here runs exclusively along planar faces. And if I were to remove this loop by dissolving the edges, you can see there is no change to the shape and form of the part whatsoever. So I'm just going to remove that loop now without any consequences. Similar story for this loop here at the bottom that runs along this lower section. And there's several loops around each part of the rail here. And I can just remove all of those with no consequences. Now, one thing we're going to want to deal with is here. You see, we have this small edge and this small cut here. This will cause issues with baking later. So what we're going to need to do is collapse this down. I think the best way to do this will be to grab these edges along here. We want all of these. So I'm going to look at it from the front. Grab them with the vertex wireframe. So now we've selected all these pieces. The best bet is just use the vertex selection, move them on the z-axis, down to that, and then move them on the y-axis across. This will make a slight difference to the overall shape and form of our rail in the end, but it's definitely the best way to clean this part up without completely remaking everything. And when you bake the details on, I don't think it'll be too easy to tell the difference. All we need to do once we've moved them into the same place is just merge by difference, and you can see I'll remove 100 or so vertices which were in this place before, and we can just check by just pulling them around to make sure everything's okay, and yeah, it is. Next thing we're going to remove is we see have some artifacts here. These again only support planar faces, so it's not too necessary to keep them. So we can just grab all of these extra vertices around the middle. And then we can just do an edge slide that way, just by double tapping G and moving it all along. Now we just need to repeat this process on the other side. Sometimes it can be a little tedious to do these kinds of retopology, but I prefer to think about it as relaxing. And a big advantage of this kind of cleanup method, as opposed to going through the long process of completely rebuilding the topology from scratch, is it's just remarkably quicker. I think for a lot of your first models, it's likely you've gone through the process of completely rebuilding the topology, but hopefully this method could save you some time. I've spotted another few loops here that really don't support anything, so we can just remove these loops, and it makes no consequence for the larger model. Now I'm a little bit suspicious of this area here. We can see some strange shading over this edge, and we can see for some reason these ones here have been marked as hard out sharp. So I'm just going to turn on the face orientation to check that. Now the face orientation's fine, so let's have a little look inside the mesh and see if anything's wrong. Nope, seems fine. If I run the sharp modifier again, it seems to handle it completely correctly. So it's possible that there was some erroneous topology here that got caught and removed when we ran the merge doubles. Or is this known now, merge by distance. These are quite high poly and will bake very well onto the... baking a pin like this will bake very well. So we're going to remove these parts here with relative ease just by selecting the loop around the outside, dissolving the edges, settling the loop, dissolving the edges, grab everything inside, dissolve it, inside, dissolve it. Take this kind of, oops, just small box cutter, take this outside section here, and you can really just do a big wiping selection of all that and just remove it pretty easily. You could probably do it all in one fell swoop actually. Let's try that. Sometimes you need to be a little bit careful when you're removing it because for some reason that I'm sure the Blender developers only know, collapsing topology can cause the shapes that are the outside of it to just sort of fall apart. We have some extra shapes here we don't need too much of where there's been an inset, so we can just pull this down using our edge slide from before, just merge again, and clean up some more of these erroneous sharp edges. Now there's some more topology that can be removed here. I'm just going to use the join tool to turn that into a triangular section here. And then come all the way along here and just remove these edges. I can check out the inside and do exactly the same thing. There we go. That's cleaned up and saved us some topology. And I'm going to do the same thing with these three edges here. Despite the fact that we are baking normals, which sometimes does require these kinds of things, we don't really need much support loops because Marmoset allows us to paint on straight normals, which will have a very clean baking result. Now let's see. We've shaved, I think, probably a few thousand polygons off this piece and cleaned up some of the erroneous topology that could have caused baking issues. So with this one sorted, let's carry on to the next one. I'm going to move this into a new folder called Low. I'm going to try as long as I don't mispress. We'll look at these suffixes afterwards and sort them out. The suppressor is actually pretty much completely fine, so we can just leave that as is and move that into the Low folder. We can actually disable this folder to make it easier to tell what we have and have not cleaned up. Similar story with the barrel, topologically just fine, although we have a few extra loops around here we don't need, so I'm going to remove them. As well as actually, the barrel runs without an inside, as we would want for pretty much any game asset, with the exception of ones where a very detailed examination could be possible. I see actually this particular edge here is supporting a bit of the shape, so I'm going to keep this loop here, but the two on the right I'm going to get rid of. It's a good little fan fill on the back here. And that's this piece ready. Not too much to be done with it. Let's have a look at what else we've got. This one up here. I think this is an interesting one because we have almost 1,000 triangles for this and it won't really be seen very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab every second loop around the outside. And I'm just going to dissolve them. Now this is quite low poly, but we really don't have too much of a need for a high amount of polygons here inside the handguard, where it'll be almost impossible to see what's going on. There we go, that's another piece ready. Oh, an extra additional support loop there, not needed. Send that to the low section. Gas block here. Pretty much all this required was removing the bevel, but I'm going to reduce the resolution a little bit because the curve isn't too strong, and again, it sits inside the handguard, where it'll be almost impossible to see this piece during 99% of gameplay. So it's completely fine just to reduce this resolution down a little. Where you really want to spend the resolution on curves is on things like the sight optics, which will be rammed right in the player's face. Let's move that into the low section. Yeah, what do you look at? We're already at the receiver. So now let's tackle some of the more challenging parts and get them into a proper low poly state. Let's have a look at this upper receiver. Now around here it seems we have some erroneous shading. This will cause unideal results in the bake, so let's try and sort it out. I'm just going to start by cleaning up a little bit of the topology and removing some of these edges. Now it is a bit of an investigation in a way to figure out what it is causing this shading error. Now we kind of have a flat face here that transitions into this curve, but that by itself should not be an issue. So let's try removing all of the merge, removing doubles or doing merge by distance. Interesting, there are no problems with that. Now let's check the topology along this edge here and see if anything sits wrong. All fine. There's a cross here, I'm just going to remove that. I'm going to try a few things like sharpening this edge here and resharpening along here. Resharpening seems to have yielded some good results, so I'm going to do that again. There we go. Now the topology runs smoothly over the face with minimal errors. In fact, actually, I'm going to do it for the whole mesh. I'm going to remove all the sharps. I'm going to completely redo it. There we go. It's now yielded significantly better results. However, this large fan here and its curvature is actually causing a bit of a problem. So you can see we've still got a bit of a shading error here around this area. And we're going to do two things to sort this out. We're just going to select these faces and flatten them. And we're going to mark a sharp here before this curve. And we're just going to make sure this part here runs in a pretty straight line. We can do that just by relaxing it with loop tools. Sorted. Let's have a look at some of the other areas. We're going to want to repeat that process that we used last time with the vertex snapping in order to clean up this rail. So we just select all of these as we did last time. So now what we need to do is just move them down again on the z-axis to match the inside piece and move them across on the x-axis, same as before. Now let's just do the same on the other side. A suggestion I have to anyone creating a rail in this style, to avoid having to go through this process, create a rail using the array system and you'll have a much easier time. If you create one section of the array, like this part here, to this part here, and then you array that several times over, it will do a lot of your work for you. Let's remove the doubles, or should I say merge by distance as it's now referred to. Now investigating this piece, these curves around here are good. They're pretty high poly, but they could be really quiet in the face of the player, so that's what we're looking for. Similar story with these curves around here. Let's do a little bit of cleanup inside here though, however. I'm going to merge this one with the one below, just for the edge slide, that I'm sure you're very familiar with by this point. Same story. But apart from that, this is quite a detailed part of the gun that could be inspected quite closely, so I'm going to leave it. However, this edge here, I'm going to slide along just like that, and just merge by distance. This edge here, I'm going to mark a sharp, and I'm actually going to put a sharp all the way along this edge. But I'm curious, something seems a little wrong here. Nope, that's alright. Slightly strange topology. I'm just going to erase though. Going to straighten these lines out a little. Oh, fine. We could actually remove some of these support loops, but I think they could help the bake around this area, so I'm going to leave them in. They'll also give it a bit more topology for the bottom while that triangulates. And I'm going to mark this edge here as a sharp, going into this curve. You'll see why later. But it's to do with the UV islands, essentially. You know, I think I've changed my mind. It'll be better to remove all of these pieces. So I'm just going to select all the way along here. And I'm just going to simply dissolve them. Same story down here. I'm going to leave these supports around the outside of that, like that. And I'm going to retriangulate it like this. Now, if the triangulation looks bad, I really wouldn't worry about it. We're adding in... fuck. And now I'm just going to triangulate this piece. If the triangulation looks bad, I really wouldn't worry about it too much. We're working for games, and the only thing we want to really avoid is extremely long triangles. So I'm going to draw a line between here and here with the join tool. Remove these, and then retriangulate it like that. And this is actually perfectly good triangulation. Let's see what I can do up here. There we go. Significantly less polygons there. We've cut off probably at least 1,000. Here, put a sharp edge here. Triangulate this bottom part here. Triangulate this end gone as well. I'm going to start removing some of these useless edges that we discussed before. They sit on planar faces and they don't do anything for us. So all I'm going to do is just start dissolving them. Generally speaking, when we're looking for low polys in games, if the edges don't hold any shape together, or simply don't have any purpose, we can really just get rid of them. Sometimes they might offer a significant enough visual benefit to be worth keeping, but in this case, I certainly don't think that will happen. Let some of the redundant edges then cleaned up. This piece is looking pretty workable. I see another edge here, which serves no purpose. So let's go to this one. Gone. We want to avoid triangles like this. We want triangles to ideally point away from the edges. These are pretty long triangles, but they aren't too bad, and I'm pretty confident they won't cause any baking errors. Interesting, there's a good angle here, so let's sharpen this one up. Is it the same on this side? It is. I think I've accidentally removed the topology. So I can just quickly join that in there. Sharpen this edge up, and everything's fine. Yeah, there we go. Let's just get rid of these parts. Oh, that's fine again. Retriangulate it. That'll be right as well. Not ideal topology, but we do need to give these something to point out. Let's just triangulate this. We don't want them going up and down. So let's just change the method. Make sure our fixed alternative are fixed. None of them's quite doing it. So let's manually join some of these pieces up over there. And that should encourage the other triangulations to go the right way. Nope. No luck like that. So let's just work on joining these ones up as well. There we go. Another vertical here. This is quite a high resolution curve, but also being on the left side of the gun, and that has a position of being really quite close to the player's face. So I'm quite happy to leave that there. That'll do for the high poly. For the low poly, sorry, over the top of the gun. Interesting, we have a bit of a shading area here. You can get rid of that just by sharpening the top of this. And then that'll do. Those are the kind of things you want to watch out for. Just when you see a transition between faces like this, or at the beginning of a curve, you really want to mark some sharps. But we'll get more into the sharp marking later. Let's put that on the low poly. Let's pick another piece to work on. The slow receiver seems like a good one to move on to, as I'm going to showcase a new thing to do. So this piece here, at the back, follows the form of the receiver remarkably similarly. So what I'm actually going to do is, I'm going to merge these two pieces together. And the easiest way to do this will simply be to select this edge here, select all faces on the bottom, back here, and just extrude this across. Now, this already has some pretty good topology on the back. I can just delete this off, remove this loop here. I'm just going to use my usual technique of edge sliding it that way, and then merging all of the stuff by distance. And that has then effectively E in that inside. And you see when we bake the normal map from the high poly, it'll be like there's a good seam here that would be indistinguishable, and yet we save a large amount of topology. So let's finish this one piece off. A few things we're going to bake is these pinholes here. So we are going to want to remove it, but this particular one crosses across some high levels, so it's a little bit more complicated, and we'll come back to it later. So, as a game asset, it's important to consider it's going to be animated, so it'll be best for us to split off some of the parts. Let's look at splitting off the magazine ejector and the part of it on the other side. So, if we try and select it as a part of the normal, it's actually a completely different piece. So, that's a pretty easy way of doing it. And we can just select it and separate by selection. Let's see if this will hold up for the other side. Yep, it does. Let's split this off. Now, these pins here, they'll bake down pretty well, so we're just going to want to remove them, which we can do pretty easily with an edge dissolve. We'll keep the supporting topology for now. Nice and easily done. Now, next up, we're going to want to get rid of the inset here. This cut that's used for the fire selector. So let's just select the loop, delete it. Select the outside loop. And press F. Fill it in. This one here we can use the dissolve technique. There we go. Small pins on this side to get rid of. They came off pretty easily. So then let's just sweep over them all with our lovely C-select. We'll leave some support loops for this one here. And then just dissolve the edges. And they will all bake back down onto the low poly later. We'll keep these ones here with the full circles, because I think that might show up in a silhouette. But let's remove this edge here and make sure these ones are marked as a sharp going into that curve. Everything around this piece, apart from that, is pretty fine. I'm just looking for a few things like this here where we can just do some edge slides to reduce the poly count down and keep the mesh a little bit cleaner. No need for sharp there. That's this piece pretty much completely in order now. Let's move it down to the... Oh, actually, there's a little bit too much here. Let's just remove these two loops. And let's move that down into the low and move on to the next piece. Handle should be pretty easy to do. Now, similarly to the previous one, how we skirted over that last part of the back, I'm going to dissolve these edges here. And we can skirt over that piece there and bake into the normal map, as its profile is almost exactly the same. Quite dense topology here, not really necessary, just going to remove those edges. And I'm going to mark some sharps in the middle of this curve, and we'll get to Y later. Missing sharps here, let's put them in. Same story around the outside. Now there's a couple of floaty strange vertexes we can just remove. Some extra little bits of topology there, as a result of a mirror. Just get rid of them. Let's just merge these ones all at the middle. Apart from that, a couple of sharps we don't want. Some planar faces there with some triangulation we're not after. And let's apply the mirror modifier. Actually, I almost didn't realize was there. Yep, all fine for this piece. Let's move it down. Let's check out this forward pin next. Now, the bevel has actually been applied on this, so we're just going to have to get a little bit clever with this one. Going to remove some of the loops of this, and that'll be enough topology for that side. Same story over here. That'll do. Going to remove the sharps around this edge here. Give this a smooth over the top look. And I'm just going to extrude this, scale it, and merge it at the center. And move it to be in line with the center of the pin. There we go. I'm just going to do the same on the other side. And there's two smooth heads on this pin. Perfect. Very easy piece here. In fact, it's actually completely ready to go. Same story here with the bolt catch release. This piece is fine. Although, actually, these two pieces up here are very close. Not too necessary. I'll take those off. But apart from that, this bolt catch here is ready to go. I'm going to conglomerate those two down into one and send it down to the low. Let's check out the fire selector. Also looking good with the fire selector. Just going to draw a line across here. In fact, that's not too necessary. Actually, yes it is. You see we have a little bit of a angle here, and that'll need some topology to support it. So I'm going to use that line here to do that. Perfect. With that done, I'm just going to merge these ones at the center here. Move the center that way a little bit, just some space with this triangle. Send that down to the low. Another one of these pins here, I'm going to tackle it in a similar fashion to the last one. Only change is this pin doesn't have that cut out of it, so it's a lot easier just to merge this part here at the center. There we go. Oh, I can send it down. Only a couple of pieces left now. Let's check out this charging handle. Now we actually have some separation here between the central column and these side parts. So I'm going to separate off these side parts and do them differently. Sorry, not differently, but I'm going to do them at a different time. Everything seems just about fine with these, but I want to mark some sharps in here. And I want to clean up some of these long loops that run around along these planar faces that we don't have any need for. So I'm just going to use that technique of drawing a triangle off them. Get that middle one dissolved. And then draw another triangle here. And dissolve these outside loops. Now see, these aren't symmetrical, so I'm going to have to repeat the process on both sides. There we go. Big one around the outside, not holding anything. On this side it is, so what I'm going to do is just connect the triangles like that. And I'm going to connect the triangles like that. Have not to make a mistake here. Triangulate did not solve it correctly. We've removed that unneeded outside loop. And these pieces now have another unneeded loop here. Runs straight across the planar face there. And it connects this additional unneeded edge. I'll remove that. Oh, actually, it does add a slight bit to the shape here, you can see, that I think is worth keeping. So I'll issue a correction on that one. I'm going to keep this here. It's actually very important to keep an eye out for this. Sometimes the changes of the shape can be quite subtle, but could have a potentially somewhat large effect on the bake. So we'll certainly keep that one in. I'd keep that in mind. Apart from that, this piece is ready to be moved down. Let's have a look at what else we've got. The central column is also ready for being moved down once these n-gons are triangulated. Only a few pieces left now. Let's check out the buffer tube. This piece on the bottom here, that would bake pretty well. So I'm going to use the dissolve technique shown before, just by selecting it and dissolving it down like that. These three edges go across the planar face, no need for them. Same story at the back here with all this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these edges. I'm going to do this at the middle as usual, and then I'm going to get rid of them afterwards. This loop here actually provides some pretty good support, so I would say it's worth the additional topology. Apart from that, this piece is ready to be sent down. This small ring here. Some slightly strange topology around this ring, so let's just take this extra loop here and just get rid of that. And let's just remove some of these unneeded edges. And merge this one into that piece there. Clean up these two, clean up that one. Basically what I'm doing is when I'm removing the edges, I just want to make sure I'm keeping the shape as close to the original as possible. And in this case that's worked pretty well. I would actually say, if you're making this piece in the first place, you could probably expend a little bit more topology on the roundness of it, because it's going to get potentially quite close to the camera, but the normal map should make it all look alright. Send that one down. This button is ready as it is, although I'm going to delete the inside of it, because the inside of it will never be seen by the player. Then I'm going to send it down. This piece here already has the inside deleted, I believe. Yep. Although it has some unneeded loops around here, which I'm just going to remove. And I'm going to send that one down. Let's check out this large piece at the back here. This could be potentially quite complicated and quite interesting. Yeah, so I'm going to, straight away, just going to remove all of these sharps off it. I'll just shade it flat for now. We've got a lot of unneeded loops. You're going to recognize these going across planar faces. We can straight away get rid of a lot of these. Not that one though, that was holding. Unneeded edge there. Just get rid of these. Slide this one up here. Let's slide that edge along. Carry on with a lot of what we were doing before. Just getting rid of more of these loops here. These edges are unneeded. This one here has no purpose. These two come in at the wrong angle. You generally want to have things facing out the way from cylinders like this. You want your edges to face away from it like that. You don't want them facing across it like this. That'll get you a better bake. But of course, at the end of the day, you can generally get away with it. Thanks to Marisa. Okay, this is already starting to look a lot cleaner. So this is quite high resolution here, and I'm just going to take a few of the edges out, because it just doesn't really need as many as it has. I would say I'm going to leave that on there. That's more like it. That amount of resolution, you can hardly even tell the difference. In fact, you actually totally can't tell the difference, because you see there's like a straight line in between here and here, and these all sit on a straight line So these are actually planar faces in disguise, and we can completely get rid of them to save a load of topology. Let's do it on the other side as well. I'm unsure if this piece is symmetrical or not, so I'm going to play it safe and just repeat my actions on both sides. There we go. Everything's alright right here. I'm going to leave these booleaned in squares with their support loops. I think I'll help them. Now, I do question the purpose of these loops here around this area, because they're running across essentially a flat surface. However, around here they do hold the form. So I'm going to remove them up to about this point here. And that yields pretty much no change to the mesh. There was slight movement here, but not too significant. I think we'll be alright. But I'll keep the outside loop just to make sure that one's alright. But these inside ones are holding nothing around this area. Yeah, a few more here at the back. Unneeded loops. And I'm going to start using the mirror, because I'm fairly confident this piece is symmetrical. Just to make sure I mirror on the correct axis. I'm using the mesh machine mirror, but any kind of conventional mirror from this modifier menu here will work just fine. Or the Holops mirror. Now, there's a few places here where we have the vertices sit quite near them, but not quite on them. So we're just going to use the edge slide and then merge by distance technique that has been very prevalent for this cleanup. You can also click one, click the other, and then click M, and then click at last, if that was the last one you selected. But I found that technique is slower than using the slide and merge. So I'm more of a fan of the slide and merge myself. Do it there as well. Shut that loop error, it wasn't important. Yeah, it wasn't. So I'm just having a kind of general look about to make sure that everything is in order as it should be. That loop just changes the form so little that I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm just going to put a loop in here to support these, because when they triangulate, they're going to need something to grab onto along here. I'm just executing another mirror there. Thanks to existing support loops, these pieces they triangulate pretty well. This piece all around here is just fine. Let's connect this loop over the top. I think this will be good for generally supporting these long rectangles. I'm just going to edge slide this one a little bit along, just to make it more square. Okay. This looks good. Let me do the sharps. Yeah, the sharps seem to have come on without any issue. Go sharpen around the bottom of this curve, as it is good to, but you'll see more about that later when we discuss edge sharps and UV seams. Okay, let's move this to low. Let's check out the next piece. So, let's have a look at cleaning up this magazine. First of all, we want to add a bit of a thickness to this cage, so we don't have these holes in it anymore. Because these holes have very tight distances inside, that'll cause issues with baking, more than likely. So let's just isolate this piece here. Select the inside of it, the cheeky little Control L, using the existing sharpnesses. Let's use Alt S to scale it in and bring it in. Now we don't want to crunch these corners too much. We'll damage the topology in such a way that we won't be able to continue with the Boolean. That looks pretty good. Let's check it out. And we've still got a little hole here in between the existing magazine and this outside cage. So let's grab just these corners And let's bring them in. Just as far as we comfortably can. About there seems perfect. There we go. That's nicely inside now. All we need to do is take this piece and this piece and use a hard ops boolean join, or union as it's actually known. And I'm going to move this piece down here at the bottom, using an edge slide up, and then press C to constrain the edge slide, bring it down. Same story on this side. Do a little cut across here, and then we can tuck that one into the main body, and that'll give us much better topology. And just make sure it's mirrored across to the other side as well. Perfect. So let's apply the boolean on this part. But we're going to want to apply the boolean as the new exact method rather than the boolean method. Otherwise we'll have a couple of issues. There we go. Perfect. Now, all we need to do is clean up the topology a little bit, and we'll be good to go. So, let's look at removing some of these parts. I'm just going to remove a couple of these loops that don't add anything to the overall shape, and that only go along planar faces. Be careful not to have anything collapse. There we go. Very small edge hidden here. Seam around the middle here doesn't support anything. Let's get rid of that. It's very high resolution bevel along here, so we'll look at reducing that in a minute. But right now what we really want to remove is just the pieces that don't change anything about the shape of the magazine itself. Or change it in a way that is insignificant, like these two pieces here. And we'll look at removing these large squares in a minute. Not a tremendous amount to be said about this section, but you can see the kind of things that I'm removing. Really just topology that has no influence on the overall thing. You'll get a feel of this better over time. You'll speed up, you'll know which pieces to remove, which pieces to keep, and you'll develop most likely some of your own techniques for cleaning up pieces quickly. I would consider that loop on the right just significant enough to be worth keeping. Use some of the slide and merge by doubles technique here to get rid of this piece. I'm going to sharpen up these edges here as they go into the big intersection at the bottom of the gun, where we're definitely going to want to have a UV seam later. Have a look at these panels on the side here. Have a look at clearing up some of these extra supporting edges that I don't think we're going to need. We should be just fine to leave this as one large n-gon and triangulate it later. sometimes if you dissolve some edges and you need some supporting loops for these end guns, holes in them here, it will actually refuse to dissolve all the edges. And in this particular case here, it's actually created some particularly good topology just by refusing to dissolve certain edges. Some stray vertices there. Let's go with that. Seems to be several of them up the length of the thing. Now, unfortunately, this isn't a symmetrical piece with this little bayonet here. So let's just go around and do it all again on the other side. This time it's not quite great ideal topology, so I'll just clean that up a bit myself. Okay, we're getting there. Let's have a look at cleaning up this large bevel. We've got some issues with vertexes up here, so I'm just going to solve these with a bit of dissolving and edge slides. And a usual merge. And now I'm just going to take every second loop to clean this up. Although, I need to be careful, because the last thing I want to do is compromise the overall shape of these other pieces as well. A couple of stray vertices there to clean up. And another edge here that can go. This is really a particularly repetitive process. There's not a tremendous amount to be said about it. Another little loop here, not too essential, we can just get rid of that. I'm deciding which ones to remove, basically just by picking about every half. I'm just trying to make the curve have kind of even quads all the way around, even length. So you can see every length, the top of these ones is just about the same. Some extra floating verts there. So to mirror just this piece, what I'm going to do is select it, the whole back area. Basically, just going to select every part, except this part here, where the mirrored segment is. I'm going to separate it, mirror it, remove the center seam, and then rejoin it with the original, and then merge by distance. Now, it's a bit of a hacky workaround, but without any proper way of mirroring only a segment that I'm aware of, it's a pretty good way to do it. You just got to make sure that the vertex is around the edges, like that one there, and you don't end up with any non-manifold edges. A good way to check is just doing select non-manifold. And the only pieces that selected are this piece here, which are non-manifold, but that's by our intention. Although we are going to have to do some cleanup here. On the inside of the magazine here, we seem to have some slightly strange topology. So I'm just going to loop slide this out here and try and get it out of where it was. And then use some edge dissolving to clean it up. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm just grabbing this inside vertex here, most likely created by solidifying, and then edge sliding to take it out. There we go. It's just about being able to see it well. Sometimes it can be a little challenging. There we go. And now I can just dissolve these edges. And do a little check to make sure on the inside that there's nothing in error. So I'm just going to turn the clipping distance up so I can get very close. And I can see everything's fine here, although it is a little high resolution on this geometry that will basically never be seen. So I'm going to turn that one down just by dissolving some of these edges as I have around the outside. Easily done. There we go. And let's check out this other side. So we've got some slight issues at the back here created with solidifying. So let's just grab this piece here, this piece here, this piece here, drag them down, and just select the correct bits, and just dissolve them, as we have been many a time before. Perfect. I think that's the inside of the magazine now, just about cleaned up. Let's have a general look about the rest of the outside, and ensure that nothing is too out of the ordinary and away from what we want. The resolution back here is reasonable, the resolution at the front here is reasonable too. These don't connect too well though, so let's do some sliding, clean up some of these floating vertices, and sort this part out. Interesting. Seems we've had a bit of an issue here with booleaning. So I'm just going to start by deleting off these faces here. And then let's use the merging here. To begin to connect these parts together. Much better. I'm going to use that mirror technique on this piece again. You may remember it already. In fact, I'm almost certain you do. It was only a few minutes ago that we used on the back of the gun. Magazine, sorry. So once I finish doing it up this side, I'm going to split this single piece off, take the other side, and then mirror it, merge them back into the original, and we should be fine. I'm going to have to delete these pieces of erroneous topology again, and use the merge again to clean and sort this piece out. I'll take this piece now. I don't want to take too much or too little. I want to take it where there's a good line. Let's get rid of these floating vertices while I'm at it. There we go. Remember to move my middle section and rejoin and merge them again. Do a little check for non-manifold. And up here, we've ended up breaking it. That's alright. We could just grab this all again after creating a face there where one was missing and dissolve it. Let's do a little check for non-manifold. Yep, we're alright. That's everything merged back to where it should be. Alright. That looks like that's the magazine cleaned up. Let's just save that and send it down to the low section. You can delete that old cutter. This bottom piece here. Simple as. Let's just remove some of these sections around the middle. And that'll do. Send it down to the low. The dust cover here also should provide little trouble. We've got a few additional support loops here that don't really serve any purposes, except for holding this piece on the back. Just deselect those. And dissolve that. We can dissolve these as well. And we can run these all the way along to there. A bevel's been applied on this end section. Let's just reduce that down. And then this piece is ready to be sent to low. Let's check out the trigger. A boolean, or a mirror, sorry, to be applied here. Let's remove the center seam. Reduce the resolution here ever so slightly. Remove some of these parts on the sides here, these planar face edges. These ones too. Although they'll most likely be back when this mesh is triangulated. This one, and this one, however, we do not need. And let's send that down to low. Let's check the butt plate out. It's got an applied bevel around it here, but it's not too high resolution. Actually, pretty much apart from removing the center seam, this butt plate is ready to go. I'm going to remove this edge here as well, just to make this curve slightly more even all the way around. Send it down. This piece of stock here, let's have a look. It's very thin here. I think I personally suggest trying to avoid things that are this thin, so I'm just going to artificially thicken it up a little bit. Extremely thin things like that usually don't exist in the reference and can often cause large problems with the bake. So I'm just going to thicken up to be about that thick and everything will be alright. this loop here doesn't really support too much. So I'm just going to... Oh, my correction here. It supports that up there. So I'm going to leave that part up there. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to change this topology here from a loop going all the way around. Just to a little tri-crossing. Save a bunch of polygons. Move those two loops. There we go. Is that piece ready to be sent now? Let's have a look at this piece here. This seems to be two pieces with some applied bevels on it. Let's just reduce these bevels down. This piece is very, very small. Doesn't need too much resolution at all. I'm going to split it into two separate pieces and then send that down. Great. These bullets aren't a part of our gun, so I'm actually just going to delete these scale references. And that is our low poly mesh now prepared. In the next segment, we'll look at the UVs for this mesh and the correct sharpening of edges to make sure the bake is as clean as possible. See you there.